Hello everyone and welcome to the February SPUG. Today's class is going to be over InfoPath Designer and SharePoint lists. If you have access to the ARNet, please go ahead and look at our USAR SPUG link and our InfoPath wiki page, which goes into a walkthrough of what we are going to discuss today. Our target audience today is power users, site owners, site collection administrators, anybody with the ability to make app changes. Training objectives. This is a beginner level class. And our KM benefits. This tool can help promote an organizational culture of innovation and increase collaboration efforts when commonly used. Our agenda for today, it shows how we will discuss InfoPath, how to use it with SharePoint lists, and provide tips on how to perform several beginner level actions. Again, as a reminder, this is only an introduction to InfoPath and SharePoint lists. There is greater functionality as the more you learn about this tool. So what is InfoPath? Why do we want to use it? Have you ever wondered what this application can do for you? InfoPath is a program that you can easily create and deploy electronic forms and integrate it with SharePoint. This is perfect for power users and site owners to create user-friendly views for list data entry. Have you ever had a list show columns you wish you could hide until a button is selected? Have you ever wanted to put validation rules or formatting rules on certain columns? Well, you can do that with InfoPath. And you may be more familiar with InfoPath than you know. The KM Directorate uses InfoPath for our registration lists, for all of our SharePoint testing. Also, SGS is now using it for their MRM request form. And as you can see in the slides, you can make them look however you want. Well, let's get started. How do I open InfoPath? There are several ways to do it, but I find the easiest way is to go to your SharePoint list. So again, we're going to go to Site Content and go ahead and actually open up that list that you're interested in applying an InfoPath form to. And you're going to go to your List tab and say Customize Form. And this is the easiest way to open up InfoPath with your SharePoint list. Let me go ahead and make these a little bit smaller so we can all see it all in one screen. There we go. And that's going to show you that normal list that you're used to seeing in SharePoint. Let's go ahead and navigate a little bit. These are your InfoPath tabs: Home, Insert, Page Design, Data. And again, as you select on things, you'll get additional tabs. Just like any other Microsoft product that's out there, you have your field, where you're going to be building your form, and you have your fields. These are your current columns that you can insert into your form from SharePoint. So these are the SharePoint columns that you may have already created in order to use in your form. Now let's start customizing the form. You can remove fields by clicking on the field that you would want to move. You can right click, or you can go ahead and click delete and delete the field. You can delete the notes, or you can right click and delete the whole row. It's completely up to you. And if we can remove rows and columns, you can also add them. So you can right click, insert a row below, and we're going to drag and drop notes back into our example. It's that simple. Now there's 3 ways to add columns and rows into your InfoPath form. You can do it the way we just did with the right click and insert. You can also go to your Insert tab and insert a templated table right here. You've got several that you can use. Or you can add in a custom table. You should be very familiar with this from Word or PowerPoint, any of those other Microsoft products that are out there. You can also go to Layout and insert columns here as well. You can make any necessary changes. Now that we've done that, let's say I want to go ahead and merge cells. I'm going to get rid of attachments. I can highlight the row that I would like to merge, right-click and click Merge Cells. Or you can be under your Layout tab, Merge Cells. And we can also split the cells however we would like. So for this example, I'm going to do 3 columns and 2 rows. And you can see that our changes have been made. Now we can go ahead and rearrange our information. I'm going to move title down, move last name up, and just kind of start making it look more like a user-friendly form. And for now, I'm just going to use the labels that were already moved over. Kind of make it into a little bit more user-friendly, not take up as much space. And then let's go ahead and delete those extra rows that we don't need. Make it a little bit more the way that you would expect an attendance list to kind of look. The other additional thing that you can do is you notice you can make any changes to these boxes. Title, last name, get rid of that underscore, make it first name, email, unit. You can make any changes. You can also, instead of having a separate row, you can type it next to your field if you want. It's kind of whatever look that you're trying to get for your form, you can do. It's completely customizable. So for example, if I wanted to move my notes over here and then merge these two, I can do it. Make this a little bit smaller again. And then there's my new form. If I want to change the way the text looks, I can highlight either the individual cells that I want affected or the whole table and come to my Home tab and make any changes to the formatting text that I would like. So if I want to do Times New Roman, size 12, and I want it to be bold and centered. It's that simple. In addition to formatting text, you can also format the cells. So let's say for this first row, I want to change the background color. I'm going to highlight the cells that I want to update. I'm going to go to Layout, and I'm going to come to Color for shading. And I'm going to go ahead and choose let's go with a blue. And you can see those changes. And let's make this maybe a gray. The other nice thing that we can do, we can add borders. So let's say I want an outline that's a little bit thicker and is black. And on the inside, maybe we'll use a gray, and that's maybe a 1 point font. And I'll click OK, and you can see that those changes have been added only to the cells that I have selected. I can highlight some of my other cells and make those changes. Again, outline, and then a gray inside. You can also update your cells, height, width, the alignment, the padding. Anything that you want to update, you can. Now, let's get into the control buttons. If you go to your Home tab and go to Controls, these are the different buttons, control buttons that you have available. Input will add a new column to your SharePoint list and your fields to InfoPath. It includes controls that you typically associate with collecting information. So you have your text box, most commonly used on a form. It lets users type any kind of unformatted text into the text box. You have the rich text box, that way that they can contain formatted text. You have a drop-down list box, similar to the choice column. Then you've got combo box, check box, date picker, date and time picker. You have several options. You also have objects, which includes the buttons, labels, ways to insert attachments, pictures, and hyperlinks. And then last but not least, you have containers, which will help organize your information. We're not going to get into sections in this class. That's a little bit more advanced. But for this class, we'll look into the input and the object when we add a submit button. So let's go ahead and add a text box. It's going to add it wherever your cursor is. So I'm just going to drag it down here to the bottom so you can see my new field. You see field 1. So that's going to be the automatic name that it gives it is field and then the number associated with it. So if I did another text box, you would see field 2, field 3, and so on. If you want to change some of that information, you can right-click on the field within the form that you're building, and you can go to Text Box Properties, and you can change the field name here. You can set a default value, and you can set up a validation of cannot be blank. I'll say OK. But when I do that, you notice it still says field 1. Well, when you right-click here, you just change the text box properties. If you want to actually change the field properties, you need to come to the Fields box, right-click on the field, and go to Field Properties. This is where you can change the actual name and display name. You notice that the cannot be blank was moved over, and if I put a default value, it also move over. And now you can see that new field. So this added a new column to our SharePoint list. If I come up and publish, that little arrow up there is your quick publish. It says your form template was published successfully. And if I go ahead and open up my SharePoint list, you see that new column was put into my SharePoint list. You can also delete columns from your InfoPath. If you right-click, you can say delete, and it's going to delete the associated column in SharePoint when we publish the form. So if I click on yes, and I publish again, oops, I did not mean to hit cancel. Publish again. I was just expecting it to say OK. It was formed. It published successfully. And if I come back, you're going to see that that column is now gone. And now this text box is now unbound because it's not connected to any column within the SharePoint list or to any field. If you want to bind it, you can right click and change the binding. That way you can have it associated with another column. In this example, it says it controls stores duplicate information because we already have the email field up here. And it'll also let you change the control if you decide that you don't want it to be a text box, but you want it to be a drop-down list or anything else. You can also do that from here by going to change control. The next kind of fun part is adding rules. So for email, if I want to come here and say add a rule and is not an email address, I want it to come up and let me know. You can quick add that rule. You can also go add a rule and say if it's blank, you want it to be red. So I'm going to update the name from rule 1 to blank equals red. And you see that it updated it. You can also copy your rule and paste it to other cells as well. To manage your rules, you'll click on the field that you'd like to manage the rule. Go to your Home tab and Manage Rules. And it'll pop up that rules box. You can also go to New, and you can choose between the different rules. So if I click on Validating, it'll create a new validating rule. Some validation rule examples. It'll let users know when the amount they enter for an expense item exceeds the approved amount. You can do it for ensuring a user enters a properly formatted phone number in a phone number box. You can make sure that they have a properly formatted email address. It's also important to note that a data validation rule prevents a user from submitting a form if the error exists. So if I go to our email is incorrect, you see that this is a formatting one, not a validation. If I want to change it to a validating, if the email is incorrect, now if the email is not correct, it will not let them close the form. It'll also notify the users that they have to do a corrective action, as you can see in the slides. And anything that is in your screen tip will also show up on the form when they do it incorrectly. So when these conditions are not met, email does not match the pattern email, and the email is not blank, it will not let them close the form. Another type of rule is formatting. And these are used to apply a text formatting or background shading or hide the control or disable the control based on certain conditions. So one that you might be familiar with is if you took any of our SharePoint classes, that for the test, you don't see question 2 until question 1 is answered. Or for the example in ours, if the title is blank, it's going to be formatted red. The last type of rule is action. We're not going to get in too much detail in this class for this one because it's a little bit more advanced and it's very varied based on what you're trying to do. You can switch views, set values, submit the form, query for data. A lot of different actions are available depending on what you're trying to do to apply to them. But what I do want to get into is adding a submit button. So below the form, I'm going to go ahead and center my cursor and I want to insert a button. To do this, we're going to go to our Home tab, go to Controls, click on Button, and you see that it inserted just plain old button. If I go to my fields, data, show my fields, you notice it didn't create a new field. It's just going to make an action happen. Well, right now I need to tell it that I want it to submit. To do that, I'm going to click on the button. You see the handles. We're going to go to Control Tools Properties, and under Actions, I don't want it to be a rule action. I want it to be a submit. You notice that it updates the label to submit. And if I want to change the text of the button, the color of the text, or the color of the button, you can do all of that. But now we have a submit button, which is great to use for those who are going to be filling out your form. They don't have to look at the ribbon bar to save the form. They just click submit and move on from there. Speaking of the ribbon bar, I highly recommend that you hide the ribbon bar in SharePoint when normal users are filling out the information. That way, for example, for us in our tests, they can't copy, paste, and do anything like that to your form. So to do that, you're going to go to your File tab. Under Info, go to Advanced Form Options. And you're going to click Show InfoPath Commands in Ribbon or Toolbar. We're going to say uncheck it, so now it will not show that ribbon bar. Before I click Publish, to give you a quick idea of what I'm talking about, this is the ribbon bar that I would like to hide. So when we come back to our InfoPath form and do a quick publish, and I add a new item again, now you're not going to see that ribbon bar. It's gone. Now, if you no longer want to have that InfoPath applied to your SharePoint list, you would go to your list settings. So List tab, List Settings, and under your general settings, you see where it says Form, your form settings, and you would just say use the default SharePoint form. Or you can, if you just do that and click OK, the InfoPath form will be still on the server, so if you want to bring it back, you can, or you can delete it completely. It depends completely up to you and what you want to do. And before we end, it's important to note that the support for InfoPath 2013 and SharePoint Designer 2013 will be matched with the support lifecycle of SharePoint Server 2016, which means it'll run until 2026. What does that mean for you? We as in the Knowledge Management Office will be looking into other options once we move from SharePoint 2013 to SharePoint 16 for what we might want to use instead of InfoPath. InfoPath will still work with 16. There is just not going to be an InfoPath 2016 to go with SharePoint 2016. You'll still use InfoPath 2013. In the meantime, again, we don't recommend using InfoPath for form libraries if you're creating them now. If they're already created, you go ahead and keep using them. But we don't recommend creating new InfoPath forms for form libraries because if InfoPath does go away, which it will in 2026, the information that's not inserted into a column will not be saved. The reason I say to use it with an InfoPath list is it's just the view of the information that you're inserting into SharePoint that we're changing. All of the information is still saved in SharePoint. It's just the view that you're looking at for the SharePoint lists versus doing a form library. However, it is still great to use InfoPath when applying to SharePoint lists. Again, the information is maintained within list columns. It's only the way the information is viewed that is changed. And that is our SPUG for February. I hope you enjoyed the class. And if you have any questions, go ahead and get with the Knowledge Management Office. Our SPUG topic for next month will be form libraries and document templates. We're going to talk about form libraries without an InfoPath attached to it. It'll just be a different type of document template. Our upcoming training for SharePoint, Essentials and Contributor will be on March 20th. Power User will be on the 21st. Site Owner and Site Collection Admin will not be until April 17th and 18th. And then we'll get back to Essentials, Contributor, and Power User in May. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this class.